Let's take a look at the events of the first 2 years of this period.
Ezra chapter 1, verses 2 to 4 tell us that in the first year of the rule of King Cyrus, he issued a decree that allowed God's people to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. In order to be read by the Israelites in the Persian Empire, this decree was written in Hebrew and placed in the beginning of this book.
There were a considerable number of Israelites who responded to this calling. However, many more would rather enjoy the ease of staying in Babylon and Persia. To further support the temple rebuilding effort, King Cyrus required the Israelites remain in Babylon and offer their fellow Jews silver and gold, with goods and with animals.
Ezra chapter 1, verses 7 to 11 mention that King Cyrus commanded Mithredath, the treasurer, to return the silver and gold vessels which were taken by King Nebuchadnezzar to the Israelites, so that they could bring them back to Jerusalem. The scriptures list the inventory: 30 gold basins, 1,000 silver basins, 29 knives, 30 gold bowls, 410 other silver bowls, 1,000 other vessels. In total, there were 5,400 gold and silver vessels. In Ezra chapter 2, we find a record of names and clans of the 42,360 returning Israelites. These are also recorded in a nearly identical fashion in Nehemiah chapter 7. This record lists leaders in order of their role of importance, with Zerubbabel and Jeshua appearing first. In Ezra chapter 3, verse 2, and Haggai chapter 1, verse 1, we find that Jeshua, the high priest, was the son of Jozadak. His name is a variant of Joshua and means Jehovah saves. Zerubbabel served as the governor of Judah. This papyrus document, dated back to the old Persian Empire, was signed by the governor of Judah. The handle of this official bottle bears the official seal of the provincial governor of Judah. These artifacts confirm the existence of the Judah province that appears in the Bible. Matthew chapter 1 tells us that Zerubbabel was the son of Shealtiel and was born after the exile in Babylon. He was a descendant of King David and an ancestor of Joseph, Jesus' earthly father.
Thus we see God's promise of preserving His children, as well as God's redemption of the world, gradually coming to pass in the history books of the Bible. From the Temple Mount Archaeological Park, we can see the ruins of the Second Temple expanded by Herod. The ruins we see now are not the Second Temple built during the era of Ezra and Nehemiah.
To understand the distinction between these two, we need to first understand the history of the Temple Mount. When the Babylonians destroyed the first temple, all that remained was a broken foundation. A relatively smaller second temple, built on top of the original foundation by the Israelites of Ezra's day, remained until 30 BC. The Romans granted governance power to an Edomite named Herod, a tetrarch of the Jews. In order to please the Jews and strengthen his power, Herod greatly expanded the second temple that was rebuilt after the exile. In order to make the second temple more grand, he leveled the top of the Temple Mount and used huge stones to lay a much larger foundation. The second temple of the Herod era was expanded on the top of this foundation.
Herod's temple was completely destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. Only the massive foundation was left behind. In the 7th century, Muslims built the Dome of the Rock, which we see today on the top of this same foundation. In this archaeological park, we can only find the ruins of the foundation of Herod's temple and its surroundings. This is the cornerstone that fell down from the turret. Here we see a partial Hebrew inscription. This cornerstone was probably placed at the southwest corner of the Temple Mount to mark the place where the trumpeters stood. Blowing the trumpet is to announce the beginning and the end of Sabbath, as well as the call of a ceremony. The Levites were assigned to blow the trumpets from the turrets. Though their main duty was to assist in the sacrificial system, some of the Levites were called to serve as trumpeters in Israel's traditions. This brings our awareness of the name list of the returnees, that almost 1/10 of them were priests, but only a few of them were Levites, who assisted the priests in the temple. In all likelihood, they might have chosen different careers during the captivity. At the end of the name list, there were 7,337 slaves and 200 musicians. In other words, for every 6 free men, there was a slave. This demonstrates the relative wealth of the returnees from exile. An impressive procession of nearly 50,000 people carrying their belongings and livestock returned from Babylon. Let's look at their route and see what they encountered when they first arrived at Jerusalem.
Some scholars think that the Israelites headed north after they left Babylon, then turned west, and finally turned south to Jerusalem. The whole journey was around 1,300 kilometers, and it took over 4 months. According to Ezra chapter 3, verse 1, they arrived at Jerusalem the 7th month in the Jewish calendar, which was September to October in 537 BC.
Under the western wall, we see obvious signs of fire. There was a commercial street under the arch of the western wall. In this restored diagram, we can see the original appearance of the street. All of these shops have now become desolate, with minimal stone structure remaining. After the second temple was destroyed, we can imagine the desolation of Jerusalem a few decades after the first temple was destroyed. When the Israelites returned, Jerusalem was not ready to accommodate so many people. In order to facilitate the governance and temple sacrifice, the priests, the Levites, and some leaders lived in Jerusalem. Other people were settled in different towns of Judah, waiting to rebuild the temple.
This piece of papyrus document, found in the Elephantine Island, is a donation list of the Jews to rebuild the temple in the Persian dynasty. We can imagine that there was probably a donation list for rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem at that time. For in Ezra chapter 2, verses 68 to 69, it says,
As soon as they came to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of families made free will offerings for the house of God to erect it on its site. According to their resources, they gave the building fund 61,000 darics of gold, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priestly robes.
Daric was the commonly accepted gold coin in the Persian Empire. named after Darius I. On the front of the coin, his image was engraved with his hands holding a bow and a spear. The gold coin was also used as a standard for weighing gold. A dark gold coin weighed 8.5 grams. 61,000 darics weighed around 500 kilograms. Mina was also a unit of weight. 5,000 minas weighed around 3,000 kilograms.
The Israelites willingly donated to rebuild the temple, looking back almost 70 years ago. Their ancestors were penniless when they left Judah under captivity. Now they returned to their homeland as free men, blessed with servants and wealth, which they could give freely to rebuild the temple. Rebuilding the temple and the society of Israel, all of these were impossible without God's protection and provision. Ezra chapter 3 records how the Israelites in the first return got ready to rebuild the temple.
At Spring of Water International Ministries, we invite you to journey with us, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Isaiah 55:10. To find out more, follow Spring of Water International Ministries.